Representative Mike Turner is totally in the bag for major contractors like Lockheed Martin. Ross Coulthart says one of the balloons in Balloongate was actually an anomalous object. Garry Nolan is doing some really interesting stuff with a foundation called the Soul Foundation related to UFOs and more. It's time for another UFO news roundup, so get in here. This is Jack with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like, please subscribe, share on social media, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Okay, here we go. Representative Mike Turner, who single-handedly stopped the hearings. And by the way, before I get too far into that, I did want to just give a little, pep talk. I noticed in the comments for the last couple of videos that a lot of people are really down. And really, I'm bummed out, too, that Mike Turner has stepped in and put the kibosh on more UFO hearings in the House Oversight Committee, since that seems to be the one entity within Congress that seems sincerely devoted to furthering this issue. But all is not lost. I just wanted to let you know, because this stuff, the toothpaste isn't going back in the tube, guys. It's really not. If they try to dam this stuff up, leaks are going to happen. We also potentially have Tim Burchett's field hearings. Now, I'm a little unclear on if those field hearings will be allowed to go forward if the House Oversight Committee isn't directly, doing anything on this issue. So we'll have to see how that goes. But there's, new legislation being passed with Congress trying to get their hands on actual UFOs and potentially bodies and all sorts of stuff. It remains unclear how sincere an effort that is, but the legislation is robust and it is seemingly sincere. And they are removing Arrow from under the auspices of Ron Moultrie. So there are reasons to be optimistic going forward. And if the legitimate processes don't work, we've always got leaks, because there is a movement. There seems to be a movement of people dedicated to disclosure and in getting this stuff out there and ending the cover-up. And I think that if they try to, put the toothpaste back in the tube, then that toothpaste container is going to spring a lot of leaks. And we are going to get some really juicy leaks if they try to dam this stuff up. So don't worry, guys. All is not lost. Stuff is going forward. There will be more progress on UFOs in the days to come. Mike Turner or no Mike Turner. But what about Mike Turner? Well, he seems to have received significant donations from Lockheed Martin, Raytheon Technologies, BAE Systems, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, etc. And there's actually a list of his top contributors. Yeah, he received $175,000 from Lockheed Martin or something like that, and Raytheon $100,000, General Dynamics $94,000. So yeah, so the dude is getting money from these major contractors. Could that be a contributing factor to him putting the kibosh on the hearings? Is he a direct tool of the control group? Is he just normally corrupt, Washington, D.C. sort of corruption? He'll do what his donors tell him to do sort of thing? How deep in this is he? And, he is the chairman of the intelligence committees, which would seem like he would have access to David Grush's testimony. However, it is important to remember that nobody was in the room when David Grush testified. There were more people in the room in the House than in the Senate, but I don't know if any representatives actually even showed up. In the Senate, it was like two people in the room with him. It was a lawyer and the stenographer and maybe a couple other people, but that was it. There were like 20 people in the room with him in the Senate, but I don't think any of them were in the House, but I don't think any of them were actual representatives. So, they may have done that in part to protect themselves from situations like this. They can't, it's plausible deniability. Mike Turner can say, hey, I wasn't in the room when David Grush testified. Sure, he should have access to all that information, but he wasn't in the room. So, it is unclear how much he truly knows and how deep he is in the employ of the control group, or if he is just corrupt. I'm trying to figure that out. Ron Moultrie seems like he is an overt agent of the control group by contrast. So, anyway, something to keep in mind. Meanwhile, Eric Weinstein is getting snarky about Balloongate. Do you remember NORAD shooting down a series of objects over Lake Huron, the Yukon, and Alaska that were all somehow never identified or recovered? Good, because neither do I. I hear the search team suspended operations to spend more time with families. I stopped following the story as I was given new distractions by news media, apparently. So, what was the conclusion on that bizarre episode? Did it resolve? Thanks. Well, that's very funny and amusing, but as it happens, Ross Coulthart, in his recent talk at the Victoria State Library, actually has some light to shed on this. So let's see what Ross has to say.
On the balloons, we're talking here about the balloons in February, the February shoot downs. Now, to give you some official response on this, I think a very senior defence official was just recently quoted in the newspapers as saying that there was nothing alien or extraterrestrial about these shoot downs, about the objects that were shot down. And I thought that was a very interesting comment, because the information I have is that two of the objects were indeed prosaic. They were just mundane objects, probably weather balloons. But there is an abundance now of sources, including a guy who literally lives at the end of the road in Alaska where this object was encountered by an F-22 jet. There was definitely a missile fired at an object which was described as looking a little bit like a giant tic-tac, funnily enough, that something was seen to fall off that object, but even though it was hit with an AIM missile, which is the top-of-the-line air-to-air missile, the object kept on going. And I've put this to different people in defence and intelligence, and I've been told that yes, the Alaska object was anomalous. And anytime I try and get a response from anybody on an official basis, they run 100 miles an hour. But you might notice that nobody has given a report back to the American public or the world about what it was that the US, for the first time in the history of NORAD, they shot something down over North America. That's an historic event. And yet we haven't been told, neither has America.
No, we have not been told, Ross. So what is the deal? Is the reason they're keeping this secret because there was a UFO that was actually fired upon? Could that be what sparked the creation of the White House UFO program, the Interoffice Agency, whatever they're calling it, that seems to have had some part in the new legislation? Is that the deal? Is that why that program was created? Because the White House was, giving orders to fire on these things. And it turned out one of these things was a genuine UFO. And then they realized, well, hey, we can't trust Sean Kirkpatrick and Arrow. We better start our own program to look into this. So there's a couple of interesting things about this encounter. If Ross's story is correct, well, one, that our missiles had some sort of impact on that object, that a piece fell off of it, because I've reported, numerous times that we fire upon these objects with all sorts of weapons. We have energy weapons that may be reverse engineered or gifted, and it makes sense, I guess, that high-tech weapons could have an effect on these objects. But there are also numerous reports of us firing upon these objects with more prosaic weapons. Some of them are anti-tank rounds, the depleted uranium rounds, but some of them are just conventional bullets or missiles. And sometimes they work. Sometimes they seem to be able to bring these objects down with conventional weapons, which has always mystified me. I mean, these are spaceships with force fields, and they can warp space and time. Why would a missile have any effect? But apparently, according to the story, it did. A piece fell off of it after it was struck by our top-of-the-line missile. Another interesting facet of this encounter is that, well, apparently the UFO didn't strike back. It didn't, either kill or disable the pilot's equipment or displace him in space and time, or what the various methods the UFOs have employed to move against those who fire upon them. It does not seem to have done that, or if it did, they have kept that very secret, and even Ross himself isn't aware of it. Ross also has this very good point to share.
But it would be very, very interesting to see an explanation from the White House. And I just think it's very conspicuous that we haven't had a response.
Yes, it is. It is very conspicuous that the White House, after creating an entire program devoted to UFOs based on Balloongate, has never actually addressed Balloongate. So what the hell? The veil of secrecy over Balloongate is really weird. I mean, I'm perfectly prepared to dismiss those incidents as weather balloons. The first one definitely seems to be a weather balloon, but we don't have any information, any real solid information on those other three objects. So there seems to be some there seems to be some truly anomalous features to these encounters, and I would love to know what they are. And apparently they were of such a nature as to create an entire independent UFO office in a place that, as far as I know, there has never been a UFO office. That is the executive branch. Meanwhile, Garry Nolan is now the executive director on the board of the Soul Foundation, a very interesting and kind of mysterious organization devoted to UFOs. This is from the Soul Foundation website. Whatever they might be, the cultural significance that U.A.P. hold for human beings have long made them symbols worthy of academic inquiry. But the interest that the legislative branches of the United States and now Canada are taking in U.A.P. have revealed that there is serious hard data on the phenomena that demands rigorous scientific analysis and considered philosophical reflection. So they are going to study both the philosophical ramifications and also the technological ramifications of UFOs. That's what Garry Nolan is doing. That's amazing. The Soul Foundation is accordingly developing an ambitious 2024 to 2025 research agenda that cuts across the natural sciences, the social sciences and humanities, and engineering to explore UAP and their implications. We are currently assembling teams of notable academics to conduct research into the implications that UAP hold for our understanding of aspects of nature like physics and matter, as well as human institutions such as law, politics, and religion. That is just so fascinating. In our advisory research, we recommend federal policies for dealing with the unprecedented challenges raised by UAP. For instance, upcoming white papers will offer legislators and defense officials credible answers about the intent of UAP operators and recommend how existing programs in the Department of Defense, intelligence community, and in certain federal departments might begin to devote time, resources, and personnel to the study of UAP. We are working to develop an initial UAP policy framework for the European Union. So that is beyond fascinating, Garry. I can't wait to see what comes of this. So there seems like they're like a think tank and also an advisory board that is going to help develop policy for governments and new ways to think about UAP. Whoa, that's nuts. So we have that, and on the other side of the spectrum, we have Travis Taylor and Jay Stratton, who have joined Radiance Technologies and seem to be positioning themselves to potentially reverse engineer UFOs. That's what they have talked about. Well, obliquely, they have talked about reverse engineering exotic technologies. So are Garry Nolan and Travis Taylor and Jay Stratton kind of doing something similar, or at least complementary? I love it. I think that's amazing, and that's exactly what we need, is for good minds with experience in the subject to actually further our understanding and even policy devoted to UFOs. So hats off, Garry. I really can't wait to see what becomes of the Soul Foundation. keep your eyes on Seoul. Meanwhile, there's an article on the Daily Mail that's been making the rounds saying that this drone could be the cause of the Tic Tac, right? So a new drone which flies almost silently without wings or propellers has raised questions about how many supposed UFO sightings might actually be man-made craft. Well, I think they are, and I have some new information about that. I have an unnamed source that provided me some juicy information that it definitely appears that Lockheed Martin has got some stuff. Let's just put it that way. Which should come as no surprise. I've covered Lockheed Martin a lot. Ross Coulthart name dropped Lockheed Martin explicitly in talking about companies that may have this stuff. He didn't go as far as to say as they absolutely did, but he explicitly name dropped them. So yeah, there are companies that definitely have stuff, and they have some really crazy stuff. I think they have stuff a lot crazier than this drone that some are trying to use to explain the Tic Tac and other similar sightings. But I would say my rejoinder to that would be no. The Tic Tac was going supersonic speeds without creating a sonic boom, guys. It was jamming these pilots' equipment. That's not something a drone would be able to do. That's an act of war. That is technically legally an act of war, and it's hard to do as well. Yeah, these objects were around for a week or so. There were 100 of them potentially going from space to the sea level in the blink of an eye, again without creating a sonic boom. Yeah, this was not a drone. I don't care if it had, if it looked like a Tic Tac or not. So anyway, but that is a story that's been going around, and that is what some debunkers have been trying to use to debunk the Nimitz incident in 2004. So I just had to get my little dig in there. No, guys, that doesn't explain it at all, but nice try. Meanwhile, I thought I would round up today's UFO roundup with something a little more mystical. I've talked before about the amazing mystical, metaphysical, consciousness-based, whatever you want to call them, experiences people seem to be having in Egypt lately. And by people, I mean people that you might know, like Jimmy Church. He had a profound metaphysical experience in Egypt. I think it was last year, or maybe just 6 months ago. There's so much news, I've lost track of time. But I covered it at the time, where he had this expanded awareness event after visiting a particular temple in Egypt. And there have been a series of these fairly high-profile events that have happened in Egypt to UFO researchers and people interested in metaphysical phenomenon, and even experiencers and practitioners of this stuff. One of my favorites is the story about Matthias de Stefano, who took a bunch of people over there and they did a tour of Egypt, and a whole bunch of those guys had amazing metaphysical experiences. Some of those facilitated by Matthias himself, and of course he had some crazy stuff happen to him too. And there were witnesses to all this stuff. Go check out Aubrey Marcus's material on that, because he does a really good job of going into the details of these experiences. Now, I make a point on this channel of highlighting the woo-woo and the metaphysical and the consciousness-based stuff because it is so intrinsic to the UFO phenomenon. I know that from personal experience. My own UFO encounter was very metaphysical and woo-woo. And that seems baked into the nature of at least a lot of these UFO events. And maybe not all of them. Some of them may simply be nuts and bolts UFOs from our 3D reality. But many of them, maybe most of them, according to Peter Maxwell Slattery, most of them are actually more metaphysical or extra-dimensional, however you want to call it. So what does that have to do with this place in Egypt, Osirion? Well, they are having crazy experiences with the water there. That's right, the water in this ancient temple is healing people. So let's listen to one example.
Not only that, but Jim decided that he was going to try and drink the water. And obviously you're looking at it and you're like, oh my God, it's this horrible green gooey stuff. But once they had chemically tested the water and found out that it wasn't in fact sewer, it was coming from another source, that it was different to the Nile, and it was in fact drinkable. Obviously he filtered it and he said that it didn't taste of anything. It was just water. But he decided, because nobody to his knowledge ever had, that he was going to drink a lot of this water. So he drank gallons and gallons and gallons of the Assyrian filtered water. Then something really remarkable happens that he says to this day he cannot explain. His eyesight, he'd been wearing glasses for years, and he said that his eyesight improved. So much so, he can quantifiably prove this. He went for a driver's test where they test your eyesight, and he passed. Whereas before he always had to have glasses, and he found his glasses actually irritated his eyes now. So he got his eyes tested and they said you do not need glasses anymore, and he has no idea how his eyesight improved. But it did happen after drinking gallons and gallons and gallons of this water. Now, there is obviously so many ancient traditions that water has healing powers, and
there you go. I think I need to go visit that temple, because... And that clip is from the great channel Funny Old World that I highly recommend anybody interested in ancient mysteries check out. No, I'm not affiliated with that channel in any way, but I definitely follow it in her research. For me, it's up there with Bright Insight and Uncharted X as really good research into these matters. So does this have anything to do with UFOs? Well, absolutely, because Egypt is said to be founded by Atlantis, by the survivors of Atlantis. I love Atlantis. I think Atlantis is super groovy. I talk about it a lot. And there are, people like Matthias de Stefano who actually can remember Atlantis. They have access to the Akashic records. They remember their past lives. Matthias can sing songs in Atlantis, and he's not just some crazy kook. People have seen him do amazing things. I mean, this cat is wild. I love Matthias. He is the real deal, a true experiencer and practitioner of ancient arts. But who developed these arts? Well, apparently Atlantis was working with the guys upstairs. They were working with non-human beings, aliens, extra-dimensionals, higher beings, whatever they were. That's where the UFO part comes in. And, some of their disciples, some of their students, like Thoth, the Emerald Tablets, that guy, he went on to Egypt. And a lot of this lore and knowledge from the star people, whoever they were, these higher beings, were passed on to Egypt. So could these crazy things that are happening in Egypt right now, like to Jimmy Church or to this guy being able to see again without glasses, something I probably need to look into, could that all be because of this survival of this ancient knowledge passed on by the guys upstairs? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, that's all I've got for today. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is Mike Turner just normally corrupt? Is he an agent of the control group? What do you think about Garry Nolan's exciting new foundation looking into the philosophy and technology of U.A.P? And we have Ross Coulthart's amazing new information that one of the balloons was actually not a balloon. I love it, Ross. Ross is gold. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a big thumbs up. I sure would appreciate it. Smash the subscribe button and the bell to be notified of future videos. You don't want to miss a thing. Join me on social media. There's Facebook and Twitter links below. I would love to see you guys there. And if you could share this video on social media, that would be enormously helpful. If you wanted to support Cosmic Road in a bigger way, there's a PayPal button below, or you can become a channel member. Channel members are rock stars, and I love you guys. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, there are plenty of other videos to check out on the channel, and I'll see you next time. This is Jack with Cosmic Road, signing out.